Chronovey presents The Mystery of Roanoke Colony. Chapter 1. A colony that disappeared into silence. They vanished, and all that remained was a word. History is full of wars, treaties, names, dates, things we know. But sometimes, it gives us a hole. A space where something should be, but isn't. And that absence speaks louder than any record. One of the oldest unsolved mysteries in American history didn't happen in the 1900s. It didn't happen during the Civil War or the Revolution. It happened before America was even born. 1587. The Age of Exploration. A group of over 100 men, women, and children, English settlers, crossed the Atlantic in search of a new world. They landed on the outer banks of what is now North Carolina. They built homes, forts, planted crops, carried hopes. Then, they vanished. When a supply ship finally returned, the colony was gone. Buildings dismantled, belongings taken, graves undisturbed. There were no bodies, no blood, no sign of war. Only a single word, carved into a post. CROATOAN. It wasn't a name. It wasn't a sentence. It was a whisper. And no one has ever fully heard what it meant. Before the silence, a colony born in tension. To understand how Roanoke became a ghost, we must first understand why it existed. In the late 16th century, England was late to the colonial game. Spain had staked vast claims in South America, Portugal in the East, France in Canada, and England, with Queen Elizabeth I on the throne, needed a foothold in the New World. So they sent explorers, merchants, pirates, even. One of those men was Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of the Queen, a visionary, and a calculated risk-taker. He was granted a royal charter in 1584 to establish an English presence in North America. The goal? Build a settlement, launch attacks on Spanish treasure fleets, and find a route to the Pacific. But the land was unknown. The climate? Hostile. The native tribes? Unfamiliar. Still, the dream of empire was stronger than fear. The first attempt at colonization, in 1585, failed. The settlers, unable to feed themselves and clashing with the local CROATOAN tribe, abandoned the effort after a year. But Raleigh wasn't done. He financed a second attempt. This time, they would bring not just soldiers, but families. The journey begins. In 1587, over 115 colonists set sail from England aboard 3 ships under the command of John White, an artist and mapmaker appointed governor of the new settlement. Among them were White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband Ananias. Eleanor was pregnant, and the child she carried would become the first English baby born in the New World, Virginia Dare, a name still spoken, even when her fate is not. The voyage was troubled. By the time they reached Roanoke Island, the same location as the failed 1585 colony, there was already tension with the local tribes, dwindling supplies, and confusion about where exactly to settle. Some wanted to relocate inland. Others feared moving too far from the coast. They compromised and stayed. They began rebuilding the old structures. They replanted. They prepared for winter. And just as the roots of the new colony were beginning to take hold, they faced their first crisis. They were running out of everything. No crops had grown yet. Trade with native tribes was strained. And the colony desperately needed new supplies from England. So John White, the governor, the father, the grandfather of Virginia Dare, made the painful decision to leave. He would sail back to England and return with help. He kissed his daughter goodbye. He promised to return by spring. He would not see them again. A return too late. White arrived back in England, only to find a nation on the brink of war. The Spanish Armada was preparing to invade. Every ship was seized. Every port locked. There would be 3 years before John White could find a vessel to take him back across the sea. By the time he returned to Roanoke in 1590, the colony had been silent for nearly 1,000 days. And when White stepped onto the shore, he found no one, no sounds, no fire smoke, no children, no crying, just trees and wind. The fort had been dismantled, not destroyed. The buildings were carefully taken down, not burned or smashed. The belongings were gone, not left behind. It was as if the settlers had picked up and walked away, in order. There were no signs of violence, no graves, no human remains. Just a wooden post, carved with 5 letters, CROATOAN, and on a nearby tree, CRO. White believed this was a sign. Perhaps the settlers had gone to Roanoke Island, known today as Hatteras Island, where a friendly Native American tribe resided. But a storm blew in before White could search further. His crew, eager to return home, refused to wait. They sailed back to England. John White never returned to America, and no one ever heard from the Roanoke colonists again. And so, the mystery was born. A colony that built homes, grew families, named children, vanished. They left no bones, no letters, no warning. Just a name. CROATOAN. What was it? A direction? A clue? A final breath? We do not know. What we do know is this. The lost colony of Roanoke remains the oldest unsolved disappearance in American history. And its silence is not empty. It's waiting. In the next chapter, we'll explore the possible fates of the Roanoke settlers. Absorption into native tribes. Starvation or disease. Spanish attacks. Storm or shipwreck. Or something darker. Chapter 2. Theories of disappearance. They left no trace. But left us questions. History doesn't vanish. Not really. Even when people disappear, their shadows remain. In records, in rumors, in scars left on the land. And so it is with Roanoke. More than 400 years after the colonists vanished, historians, scientists, and storytellers still search for the truth. They dig, decode, and debate. But the deeper they go, the more they find not answers, but possibilities. Theory 1. Absorbed by native tribes. Of all the theories, this one is the most plausible. And, perhaps, the most human. The colonists, cut off from England for 3 years, may have realized help wasn't coming. Their crops had failed. They were low on supplies. To survive, they would have needed allies. Food, shelter, language. Nearby were several native tribes, some hostile, others friendly. The CROATOAN tribe, modern-day Hatteras, had previously welcomed English explorers. Some historians believe the colonists simply moved south to live among them. Evidence? Centuries later, European settlers reported gray-eyed Native Americans who claimed descent from white people. Some tribal oral histories mention strangers who came from the sea and stayed. There were also reports of European-style tools, homes, even religious practices within native villages that predated colonial expansion. But here's the catch. No direct evidence has ever been found. No graves with European remains. No verified artifacts tied specifically to the Roanoke settlers. If they were absorbed completely, leaving behind no name, no language, no trace. A silent assimilation. A fading into the forest. Theory 2. Starvation and death. Another, more tragic possibility is that the settlers simply died. The land was unfamiliar. The soil was poor. The climate could be brutal. The colonists lacked both supplies and experience. Many were artisans, not farmers. If crops failed, and if trade with native groups soured, the settlers may have faced mass starvation. The silence of the site, no signs of violence, could suggest that they perished slowly, over months. Not all at once. Some may have wandered, searching for food. Others could have tried sailing south or north along the coast. They may have split into small groups. They may have died separately, too scattered to leave behind a clear story. It explains the lack of graves. If bodies were lost in marshes, forests, or rivers, they might have left nothing behind. But again, where are the remains? Archaeologists have searched, dug, sifted, and still, almost nothing. Not even bones. Theory 3. Attack or massacre. Could they have been killed? Some tribes in the region were openly hostile. Tensions had risen even before White departed. Misunderstandings, disease, and land disputes had already strained relations between natives and the English. One possibility is that a coalition of native warriors attacked the colony, perhaps in response to earlier violence committed by English explorers. But this theory runs into a wall. There were no signs of battle, no blood, no burnt buildings. In fact, the fort looked dismantled, not destroyed. Could the colonists have been ambushed and removed quietly? Could the attackers have taken captives, absorbed children, erased the colony cleanly? Perhaps. But even the most efficient attacks leave some trace. Weapons, graves, signs of resistance. Roanoke left none. Unless the attack wasn't physical. Theory 4. Spanish sabotage. In 1587, the New World was a geopolitical chessboard. England and Spain were at war, not just at sea, but through proxy and colonization. Spain had settlements in Florida and elsewhere along the coast. They were aware of England's efforts to settle North America. Some believe Spanish agents discovered the Roanoke Colony and destroyed it, as a warning. Quiet, swift, absolute. It would explain the lack of evidence, a professional operation, not a tribal uprising. It would also fit with Spain's record of suppressing foreign claims in its territories. But no Spanish records mention such an attack. And the Spanish were known for bragging in writing when they succeeded. Silence in their archives raises doubt. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Less so. Theory 5. Escape attempt gone wrong. There's one theory that often gets overlooked, not because it's wild, but because it's too ordinary. The colonists tried to escape. They may have built boats, crude, desperate vessels, and attempted to reach another settlement, or perhaps sailed down the coast to reconnect with native allies. But the Atlantic is merciless. Storms, currents, inexperience. A single voyage could have claimed all of them. If they drifted far enough offshore, their remains may be lost to the sea forever. This would explain the dismantled structures. They may have used the materials to build rafts or boats. It would explain why they left no message beyond CROATOAN, possibly a destination, not a farewell. A risk taken in silence, and paid for in disappearance. Or something else. And then, of course, there are the stranger possibilities, the ones that live on the edge of reason. That the colonists were taken by supernatural forces. That they became the center of ritualistic sacrifice. That they were abducted by something not human. Or even, as whispered in the shadows of folklore, that the island itself rejected them. These theories are not supported by history, but they are supported by silence. And in the absence of answers, silence becomes an invitation. A vanishing that became legend. Whatever happened to the people of Roanoke, one thing is certain. They were erased. Not forgotten, but removed, cleanly, from the record. In their place, we built a legend. Today, their story is told in poems, novels, ghost stories, even horror series. Virginia Dare has become a symbol of innocence, of loss, of America before America. But she, and the others, were real, and they are still missing. Their story doesn't ask us to believe. It asks us to remember. Because mystery is just memory in shadow. Chapter 3. Modern Investigations and AMP. The Search for Truth. Digging through silence. The mystery of Roanoke isn't just a legend told by candlelight. It is a question that modern science, archaeology, and historical inquiry have spent decades trying to answer. And yet, for every new clue, for every dig site, for every theory tested, the silence deepens. But not for lack of trying. The first digs. In the early 20th century, archaeologists began exploring Roanoke Island, searching for artifacts, ruins, or burial grounds that might reveal the colonists' fate. They found remnants of the original 1585 settlement, the first failed colony, but curiously little from the 1587 group that vanished. For decades, it was believed that no trace of the lost colony remained. But that began to change in the 1990s and 2000s, when archaeologists expanded their focus beyond Roanoke Island, especially to the area marked by the word CROATOAN. CROATOAN, Hatteras Island. Modern-day Hatteras Island, once known as CROATOAN, became the focal point of a renewed theory that the colonists did indeed relocate there, as John White believed. Excavations led by the CROATOAN Archaeological Society uncovered European artifacts dating back to the late 1500s. Broken sword hilts, English-style gun flints, brass ring fragments, Elizabethan-era copper items. These were not trade goods. They showed signs of everyday use, wear, and modification, suggesting they may have belonged to people who lived, not just visited the island. But it wasn't conclusive. Artifacts could have arrived through shipwrecks, trade, or individual wanderers. Still, it was the first hard evidence that English settlers may have integrated with the local CROATOAN tribe, just as some oral traditions had claimed. Was this where the colonists went? Or where some of them ended? DNA doesn't speak yet. In recent years, scientists have begun applying genetic analysis to the mystery. The idea is simple. If English colonists were absorbed into native populations, then some genetic traces may remain, especially among descendants of the CROATOAN or other regional tribes. But the challenges are immense. Centuries of migration and mixing make it hard to isolate meaningful markers. Native tribes often refuse DNA testing for cultural and ethical reasons, and rightfully so. The colonists left no known remains to use as genetic comparison. So far, no DNA study has provided clear answers. But researchers haven't given up. Efforts are underway to map genetic ghost patterns in populations along the North Carolina coast, looking for anomalies or traits that don't belong, unless history forgot to record them. The Dare Stones, clue or hoax. One of the strangest leads in the mystery came in the 1930s, when a series of stones, allegedly carved by Eleanor Dare, were discovered across several southern states. The first stone read like a message from the grave. It claimed that most of the colony had been killed by natives, and that only 7 survived, including Eleanor and her daughter, Virginia. It ended with a plea. If this stone be found, pray for us. Over time, dozens more stones were discovered, each telling a continued story of survival, loss, and eventual death. For a time, they caused a sensation. Newspapers called them the Rosetta Stone of American mystery. But most historians today believe the majority were fakes, created for fame or fortune. The language was inconsistent. The stonework suspicious. Still, the first one? Some experts believe it might be authentic. A single voice reaching out through time, carved in stone, left in the woods, and nearly lost to hoaxes. If real, it would change everything. Site X, A New Frontier. In 2012, the First Colony Foundation announced a discovery that reignited global interest in the mystery. While re-examining a 16th century map drawn by John White, researchers noticed something strange. A patch on the map, painted over in a slightly different color. Using imaging technology, they found that under the patch was a fort symbol, placed far inland from Roanoke Island, near the present-day town of Edenton, North Carolina. This site, dubbed Site X, became a new target. Excavations at the nearby Albemarle Sound revealed artifacts. English pottery shards. Metal pieces consistent with 16th century technology. Fire pits with European-style cooking evidence. Did a group of settlers split off, heading inland? Was this a backup plan? A place to regroup if things went wrong? The evidence is suggestive, but not conclusive. Just like everything else in the Roanoke story, it whispers, but never speaks. A modern mystery, not just an old one. The mystery of Roanoke isn't just a tale from the past. It is active, ongoing. There are still people digging, still experts scanning old maps, reading faded documents, building genealogies, cross-referencing trade goods. There are descendants of Native American tribes who still carry stories, passed down not as myth, but as memory. They speak of white ancestors who came and stayed. They remember names they did not give. There is more to find. We are not finished. But the silence, it persists. What remains? Roanoke may be the first great American mystery, but it won't be the last. What makes it unforgettable is not just its age, but its shape. It begins like history, and ends like myth. We can carbon date bones. We can scan coastlines. We can run DNA tests. But we may never truly know why they left, or why they stayed, or why they were forgotten so completely. Some answers, perhaps, are meant to stay buried, not out of cruelty, but because silence protects what it cannot explain. Chapter 4. What Roanoke Left Behind. Some disappearances echo louder than presence. We imagine history as a line, clean, ordered, marked with names, kings, wars, inventions. But real history is full of ruptures, gaps, voids. And Roanoke is one of the deepest. The lost colony didn't simply vanish from a map, it slipped out of the narrative. No final letter, no confirmed burial, not even a survivor's tale passed down in European tongues. Just absence. And that absence became a presence in itself. A lesson in fragility. The people who came to Roanoke weren't adventurers chasing myths. They were families, mothers, carpenters, infants. They carried dreams of land, of home, of permanence. But they entered a world that did not care about dreams. Their tools rusted. Their names faded. Their colony, perhaps the first to attempt permanence, became a ghost. Roanoke reminds us that civilization is fragile. That a settlement is more than walls and flags. It is memory, shared language, continuity. Break the chain of memory, and a people vanish even when they leave behind bones. In Roanoke's case, they didn't even leave those. What we think vs what we know. We think we know what happened. They were absorbed. They were attacked. They fled. They died. But all of those are narratives we create, because we cannot accept not knowing. What makes Roanoke different is not that it's unsolved, but that it's unresolvable. And that haunts us more than we admit. Because if over 100 people can disappear, in daylight, in history, what else might be lost? What stories might never be told? What silences have we mistaken for noise? History's first American ghost story. The United States had not yet been born when Roanoke vanished, but its first ghost story was already written. A colony, founded on hope, ended in absence. And from that absence came legend. Virginia Dare became more than a lost child. She became a symbol of innocence lost, of colonization's cost, of a continent that doesn't yield its secrets easily. Roanoke became an origin myth, not of a beginning, but of a warning, the final silence. And so, we return to that one word, CROATOAN. Not a sentence, not a story, just 5 letters. They may have meant, we are safe. We fled. We were taken. Remember us. Or maybe, they meant nothing at all. Just a carving in wood, scratched in desperation, or left with intention. We'll never truly know. And that is why the story endures. Here on Chronovey, we don't chase answers. We trace the edges of the forgotten. The Roanoke Colony was not the first group to vanish, and it will not be the last. But it is perhaps the most elegant disappearance in history. A vanishing so clean, it became legend. So when you hear the wind rustling through the trees of Hatteras, or stand on the empty sandbars of Roanoke Island, remember this. Some absences are not empty. Some questions are meant to echo. And sometimes, that echo is all we are ever meant to hear.